Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:07 here on this here O'Connor and Company morning program to get you started with all the news you need to, seize the day. Coming up at 7:35, Nick Minnock, our pal from Channel 7, will get us the latest out of the Loudoun County School Board, as we've got one board member now calling on the Loudoun County Public Schools to reverse their transgender policies that are currently at odds with federal law. And at 8:05, Mark Levin on his new book, On Power, released today. Check that out. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
And good morning, Julie. We're joined now by author and Dr. Peter McCullough. His new book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, is also out today, and in a very important book, considering the national conversation we're having right now with regard to vaccines, with regard to shots that aren't, historically defined as vaccines, and other concerns that people are having with regard to the additives to vaccines. It's all in here. Doctor, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me. And I'm sorry for the setup like that, but part of the confusion I think people have about vaccines is we've gone so far from where, I'm Generation X, where we were growing up, how we dealt with viruses and how we dealt with diseases and vaccines versus where we are today. I'm old enough to remember having chickenpox parties where, one kid in my second grade class got chickenpox and all of the moms and dads tried to get their kid to go and play with that kid so they could get a mild form of it and build up immunity, right? Was that the wrong way to go back then?
It was a management approach, and the same thing happened with measles. But one thing is for sure, all of the infectious diseases that we vaccinate against and their outcomes, including death, markedly declined, typically by more than 90% before the first vaccine was ever rolled out. So we found in our research that the vaccines were given undue credit for, resolution of chronic disease, chronic infectious diseases, and it simply wasn't the case.
And today we hear often, screaming headlines that there's a new outbreak of measles in this country. And it's I think you would have the number better than I would, but I think it's like 150 cases or something. Is that truly an outbreak? And have we lost the ability to sort of handle sort of minor flare-ups like this in various areas?
We've lost the proportional understanding of measles. Now, worldwide in 2003, there were 600,000 cases of measles, and there's typically benign and severe cases. There are very good treatment protocols, and we shouldn't lose anyone due to measles. So 600,000 worldwide. In the United States, I think we're at about 1,200 right now. Of those who've had measles, some have taken the vaccine, some haven't. The deaths look like they were all preventable. So the public health messaging really ought to be in the middle of these outbreaks. It ought to be on how to treat measles, because doctors have, in a sense, forgotten how to do the basics.
Doctor, I'm curious about your sort of a before and after opinion. 40%, only 40% of parents say that they're going to go with the fully recommended schedule for vaccines for their children. And I'm curious, you've been in this sort of world for a long time now, decades, and there was a pre-COVID and a post-COVID world, specifically how parents feel about vaccine. Can you shed some light on that? I certainly have seen a lot more skepticism among parents, an unwillingness, a lot more worries. What's been your experience with parents and their approach and opinion of vaccines, and specifically the schedule that's recommended for kids?
What makes people so uneasy is the cavalier nature to which safety outcomes have been handled by our public health agencies and by doctors and healthcare systems. Probably like you, myself, my co-author John Leake, we took all the vaccines. I took annual vaccines for being a doctor, hospital privileges, all of that. I've never had a problem with the vaccine. My children took all the vaccines, no problems. But what we learned through the COVID-19, essentially vaccine debacle, where the vaccines were unsafe and ineffective, parents came forward and said, wait a minute, my children had problems with the routine childhood schedules. And so all of this started to foment over the last few years.
We're speaking with Dr. Peter McCullough. His book is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. And I tell this story often. It's an anecdote. But my oldest child, my firstborn, she developed cerebral palsy. It's because she had seizures during childbirth. And as that was sort of uncovered as she became a toddler and we saw that she didn't have full use of one side of her body, her pediatrician said, okay, we're going to put her on a different schedule for vaccines. We're going to roll these out a little slower because she had some issues with her brain when she was born. And I had asked my pediatrician, well, wait a minute, why are you just doing that for our child? Why don't you do that for all children if this is an issue? And my pediatrician said, well, we try to throw as many vaccines as we can per visit to the pediatrician because most parents won't be diligent enough to bring their kids on a regular basis. So we try to get as many vaccines in the kid as possible. Is that really why the schedule is the way that it is, doctor? And is that really the best thing for the child?
It's true. It is opportunistic. The reason why they backed off on the schedule in your child is they were concerned about more neurologic damage. And in fact, vaccines can cause neurologic damage. If there's a high fever and a seizure, then there's about a 40% rate that something terrible happens, like a tic or epilepsy, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. So the febrile seizure can be a real sentinel event. The principles are vaccines are far safer when they're given individually, given later in life beyond the window of neurologic development, and then fewer of them. There is a burden that the kids are facing. This will be more complicated.
I got to jump in here. If that's the science, then why do we do the opposite? Why do we put these vaccines on 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds when it is safer and smarter to do it as the child is older?
It's just as the doctor explained to you. It's a matter of convenience to kind of load these during the well baby visits. Recently in Senate hearings, it was uncovered that pediatricians get bonuses if they keep these schedules. I think it needs to be deconstructed and evaluated.
Wow.
Doctor, real quick, yesterday I saw that the American Academy of Pediatrics has issued a statement saying that there should be no non-medical exemptions. So that would take away religious exemptions for vaccines. Can you give us your opinion on this? And you talk a little bit about a lot about this in your book about sort of the sort of vaccine world and these associations and these medical associations and the biotech world. Give us a sense of your opinion of these medical associations.
This is characteristic of a delusional type of ideology, like a doubling down. So this academy senses that there's now significant vaccine hesitancy. So instead of addressing it like we're talking about today, maybe instead of saying no, now we're not going to let anybody get out of this. And I'm here in Texas. I've talked to one of the members of the Mennonite community out in West Texas. They're not taking vaccines, and neither are the Amish. And it doesn't matter what this academy says. There are people in this country that aren't taking them.
Could I also ask you about the additives? A lot of times there's confusion here where the vaccine itself we've known about for years and it's been tried and tested. And yes, there are dangers and precautions. It always makes me laugh that they give you this giant stack of paper in the doctor's office as the needle is going into your little child's thigh. It's like, wait a second, I haven't read any of this. But now I'm learning that it's not just the vaccine itself, it's all of the additional like preservatives and other things that they put into the concoction there. Is that something that we should be evaluating? And if not, why aren't we?
It's part of the story. Finally, mercury was taken out of the vaccines this year. It's only about 4% of flu shots had mercury in them. But aluminum is still a big problem. And people have said, listen, aluminum shouldn't be in the human body. They shouldn't be using this as a preservative or an adjuvant. And because since 1986, the vaccine companies are immune from liability and lawsuits, they have not worked to improve their products or make them safer.
Doctor, can you stay with it? We have so many more questions. And I feel like I've been focusing, and we've been focusing on a lot of the precautions and concerns. We should talk about the effectiveness of these vaccines and in many cases how good that they have been. We are not anti-vaccine, but we're also not, we don't want to just, be cheerleaders as well. There are real questions that people have, and I think that they're worthy of exploration. Can you stay with us as we explore it a little bit further?
Sure, I'll take one more segment, then I have to get to work.
Nope, I understand. It'll be fast. In fact, 60 seconds from now we'll continue.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
And we continue with Dr. Peter McCullough. His book is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. And we're trying to hit all three of those in the title here, Doctor. We haven't mentioned autism, really. And again, full disclosure, I have another child who is on the autism spectrum. And I think a lot of parents, when they find out that their child is on the spectrum at varying degrees, they are searching for answers. And oftentimes the indications that somebody has autism happens right as their speech is developing and other sort of more advanced behaviors are being observed, or lack of behaviors for that matter, right around 2.5, 3 years old. And that's when you get a whole load of vaccines at that pediatrician's visit. Do you believe that this issue has been researched enough, that we do have good scientific data once and for all about any link or no link at all?
No, it has not been researched adequately at all. You know, the vaccines keep adding up on the children. So between 12 and 15 months now, 16 different things are given at one time. That 16 component combination has not been studied at all. So we have a situation where the CDC says autism is now 1 in 31. That means 3.2% of children, about 27% of those children have profound autism. It means they'll be disabled for life. So there is an autism epidemic. The data are pointing to an observation that maybe vaccines in combination are a risk factor for autism, and it needs to be thoroughly investigated.
Doctor, you also in your book talk about the sort of the fund, the government fund that provides money to those that have an injury due to a vaccine. And, you know, this gives protections to the developers of these vaccines. And it's a really tough issue because we obviously want these manufacturers to do the research into these vaccines and develop these vaccines. But you say this law should be reevaluated, that it isn't fair to the victims of vaccine injury. How should this law be? What would you like to see?
If the law was repealed, then the vaccine manufacturers could face lawsuits from parents, and this would be carried out in the courts. Evidence would be weighed. I think if the Vaccine Injury Compensation Act law was repealed tomorrow, I bet companies would remove a lot of unnecessary vaccines for legacy diseases like diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. We have antibiotics nowadays. We don't need those.
But if it was totally rescinded, if there was no law protecting these manufacturers, do you worry that there would be no incentive? I mean, it is risky business to develop and put on the market these vaccines because, as you noted in the book, which I thought was very interesting, there's always going to be an injury. These medicines are always going. There is going to end up being some injury. Do you worry about that disincentive to develop new medicines that can potentially save lives if there's no protections?
I don't, because continuous refinement does yield safer vaccines. The polio vaccine is a great example. The current IPV or injectable polio vaccine has a terrific safety profile. It's never implicated as a problem, but it went through a series of iterations. That's what should happen.
Dr. Peter McCullough is our guest, and his book is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. How are you at this point, or your book and your approach to these issues being received by your colleagues, by the medical profession? Is there more openness right now? Because Lord knows during the pandemic, any voice that diverged from what we were constantly hearing, either from the government or from medical associations, they were ostracized. They were excommunicated. You had to deal with quite a bit of that as well. Are things changing?
Things are definitely changing. I am getting really a ton of messages from the medical practice community saying thank you for the historical explanation so people can understand this madness around vaccines happened with smallpox. There's been tremendous hubris and arrogance and money and power around vaccines from the very beginning. And, people knew with the COVID vaccines that if you had COVID illness, you took a vaccine, you had COVID illness, it just kept going and going. The advice is don't stop vaccinating. We never do that. And with the COVID vaccines, we're up to 8+ shots. We don't have any shots where there's 8 shots. So people knew there was some type of madness, and they wanted to know, how did this happen? We've cracked the code in our new book.
Well, and finally, would you describe, they use the term anti-vaxxer all the time. If anybody asks questions, challenges the current methodologies and procedures that are being recommended, or for that matter mandated, do you consider yourself anti-vaccine?
Not at all. I counted up the number of vaccine doses I took. It was 69 total. So I can't be smeared with that term. Really, I'm vaccine risk aware, and that's what all educated consumers should be. They should be aware of the risks and the theoretical benefits. And I think where we're going is it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all schedule for everyone. I think we're going to move into risk stratification for who really needs them, and it's a compelling case then to go ahead and vaccinate.
Is it the message that vaccines are perfectly safe, which obviously they're not, otherwise they wouldn't hand you that stack of paper every time you go to get the shots with all the precautions. But that message, it was determined that would be the talking point from the CDC and Health and Human Services all the way down to your pediatrician, because it was for the greater good. The greater good was weighed that it was better to eradicate, so-called, these viruses, these viral infections like measles or polio or what have you. That a benefit was served by telling everyone that these were perfectly safe. And yes, if there is some collateral damage and people are harmed by these vaccines, it's worth it for the greater good. Is that the correct public health approach on these sorts of things?
Well, you framed it as the penultimate question is, should human lives be sacrificed with a vaccine for the greater good? And, this needs a very thorough ethical debate. Many with children say, listen, no, there's multiple studies now showing completely unvaccinated kids are healthier than their vaccinated counterparts.
Well, the best thing that I can say for our listeners, first of all, again, don't take my advice. I'm not a doctor. You'll die if you take my medical advice. Dr. Peter McCullough is a doctor, though. He has written this book, and we trust our listeners and our audience to be wise and to educate themselves and make the best decisions for themselves and their children. I think that's what being American is all about. It's Dr. Peter McCullough. His book is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. Thank you, Doctor. It's always a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's now 7:24 in your nation's capital.